Hello everyone, welcome back to Leeton. And now made up of my polytunnel, the frame at least, has arrived. Now this is a cheap frame from Amazon, and I'll go through all the details of it with you in a bit. But I've got two boxes of galvanised poles, some slightly sketchy instructions. But of course I've just come back from work and it was like, let's tear into them and unwrap it and have a look. So I've put together just one hoop loosely, there's no bolts in it or anything, and I'm just going to stand that up to try and explain what I'm going to do. So yeah, it probably will fall apart on me as I do this because there's no bolts in it, like I said. There you go. So as you can see, for somebody like myself, I'm just over 6 foot. It isn't really tall enough, but I knew that when I bought it. So my plan is to make proper ground anchors for this. I'm an engineer by trade, so I'll fabricate up some ground anchors that will sink into the ground and concrete in. And within that, I'll build in the facility to lift this polytunnel about, I'd say, I'd like it sort of up there, about 8 foot, maybe a little bit more. Now I've ordered this frame without the cover, so that is an option on Amazon. The reason being is that the covers, the cheap covers with the meshing, I've had them on clutches and things in the past, and I know that the first strong wind that we get, it will disintegrate, and we get some hellish winds here. We're at the top of a hill and there's a field next door, and it howls across there from the southwest and it will just get shredded. So my intention is to lift, reinforce and improve this frame by adding braces, steel braces, etc, etc, and then fit a proper polytunnel cover, polythene cover to it. So when I do the foundation frames for them, I will also be fitting a wooden base rail so that the polythene gets clamped down properly, as it would if you were buying a more upmarket tunnel. Now I appreciate, I'll put this down a second, get one of the poles. Now I'm certain if you went to one of the mainstream professional polytunnel providers, and there's several out there, that they would be using a thicker wall of steel than this. But this is the same diameter as, I was looking at a 6x3 tunnel, which this is, or at least it would be if you bought the frame, the cover, sorry. And their tube is exactly the same outside diameter, but they probably do use a thicker wall, granted. Always happens, doesn't it? I'll get that later. So I understand that I'm going to have to reinforce this, put in some additional braces, etc. Now as I said, this is a 6x3 tunnel, meters that is, if you bought the cover with it. But because I'm going to supply my own cover and my own base rail and foundation frames and all of that, I could actually make this slightly longer, because these hoops, there's 7 hoops in this kit to fit a 6-metre long tunnel. And if you look at a lot of the mainstream tunnels, they're normally about 5 foot apart, 1.5 metres. And I'll show you the plot in a minute, but I think I could probably get this to about 7 metres in length, and then just buy some polythene to suit. So from a cost point of view, I costed up the tunnel that I would like with all the bells and whistles, etc., from one of the professional, and I'm not knocking the quality of their product at all, but from one of the companies out there, one of the top 3, and I was looking at over £1,000, and that was installing it myself for a 6x3 tunnel with a base rail, with the doors that I wanted and crop bars and everything else. This frame has cost me £175. I suspect by the time I've finished reinforcing it, bracing it, foundation frames, and bought the cover and the base rail, I'd say it's going to cost me about £500. So I'm hoping for a saving of about £600 or £700 on this polytunnel. Now I am fortunate that I've got the tools and the knowledge, skills, etc. to do the work and reinforce it and everything else. But it's just something to consider, you know, if you can do a little bit of welding or a bit of mechanical engineering, or you know somebody that can, this may be a way forward. That said, the proof is in the pudding. I haven't done it yet. It hasn't been wind tested yet. As I said, we get some hellish winds here, and that will be the acid test, won't it? But I'm really excited. It'll be the first proper polytunnel I've owned. I've had some small things in the past, and it's going to allow me to grow all the crops that I want to grow. Start earlier in the season, finish later in the season, etc, etc. Okay, so I'm going to carry you around with me to do this bit, so I apologise if the footage gets a little bit shaky. But this area here, down the centre of this plot, is going to be where the polytunnel goes. Now, when I measured the plot, I thought, well, I can get a 6x3 in there. But then when I found this frame on Amazon, I thought, well, if there's 7 hoops for a 6 metre frame, and I spaced them out a little bit further apart to say 1 metre, I could get a 7 metre tunnel, 7x3, and then buy a piece of polythene to suit. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Now, as I've discussed in previous videos, at the end there we're going to have composting bays. Then I need a path in front of those bays, obviously. Then the tunnel could start at that end, work its way along here, and finish somewhere about there. And the reason I don't want to go right to this end is because I want to have a couple of IBC containers here, both sides of the tunnel, at the end of the tunnel, like either side of the door, if that makes sense. And I'm going to make my own guttering system to collect all the water, because it's a huge area, and that'll really help. So that's kind of my plan. Obviously I can't do it right now. It's so frustrating that we've bought this house. It's a 1930s build, and we're renovating it, so a lot of my time is spent inside, knocking walls down, rebuilding walls, plumbing, heating, electrics, plastering, carpentry, tiling, you name it, I'm doing it. And obviously that has to come first because we live here and the family and everything else. So, but as part of that renovation, we've got to hire a mini digger to dig up some drains and reconnect and do all kinds of work. And while I've got that digger, I'm going to get it down here and move this soil around. That shed's going, as I've mentioned in previous videos, and we're going to level all this out using these piles of soil, etc. When that's done, then I can put the polytunnel on. But the reality is we're not going to get the digger until probably September, because I want to let this veg grow first, and we've got a lot of jobs in the house to do before we get to that point to connect the drains. However, I can make the foundation tubes and get them fabricated and painted and ready, so I'm going to have to make 14 of those, and 7 hoops, 2 ends to a hoop, 14. So I can get that done, and I'll do a video on how I do those. And sort of September, October time, I'll be cracking on getting this tunnel in. And the other beauty of me doing it this way is it's costing me £175 now for the tunnel, for the frame, sorry. So next month or the month after, I could buy the timber for the base rail, and the month after that I could buy the steel and the bits and pieces to reinforce it, and then the month after that I could buy the polythene. So it's a good way of spreading the cost as well. And I think it'll be fine as long as I reinforce it properly and everything else, because I'm just spinning you around this field. It's actually a building site. Believe it or not, they're going to build 600 houses on there, and we knew that when we moved in. And we have actually got a bit of green space between us and where the houses are going, so it's not so bad. But the wind howls across this. This is southwest, so that's a prevailing wind. So I've really got to make sure that this polytunnel is bomb-proof if I can. It will get some shelter from the fence, and those posts are actually 10-foot posts, and they were put in 2 foot in the ground before we had the topsoil dropped in here. If you go to the introduction video, you'll see that we had 90 ton, 3 Volvo dump truck fulls of soil dropped over here from the building site for 40 quid. I had a bit of a deal with the foreman on the site, because this used to run downhill, and that corner was 3 foot lower than it is now. So them posts are not going to move. They're 5 foot, 5 foot in the ground now, so they're not going anywhere. There's 2 foot of concrete on the end of them. We also banked up the other side with a load of soil. So the polytunnel will get some shelter with this fence, but it's still got to be really strong, obviously. So that's the plan. I'm going to I've got a few things to do, and then after I've had my tea, I'm going to come down here and light the little chimney here, burn some of the wood that we cut off the conifers, and sit by the fire. And I'll bring my laptop down with me and show you the frame on Amazon, and I'll show you the instructions for the frame, and I'll try and explain on the screen how I'm going to reinforce it and how I'm going to make the foundation frames, etc. I'll do some sketching for you on the camera. So that's the plan. Stay tuned. Okay then, so let me explain the plan behind this polytunnel, the frame, and how I'm going to adapt it, etc, etc. So I'm going to spin the camera around so you can see the frame on the screen, and some paperwork as well. Just tilt you down a bit. That should all now be in view. So just as the fire starts to dish out a load of smoke, so this is what I've bought. It's from a company called Crocodile Trading, and I bought it via Amazon. Now, I did look on Amazon before I came to shoot this clip, and there's none left on Amazon at the moment, but you may be able to get one through Crocodile Trading direct. Now, the actual frame looks something like that when it's assembled, and as I discussed earlier, it isn't high enough off the ground for me. But what I need to do is extend this section here, and to do that I will fabricate a foundation anchor, or a ground anchor, which will basically be a piece of tube with a plate welded to it. The tube will go through the plate, be welded on both sides, that will get buried in the hole, and I will pour some concrete on top of this at the bottom of the hole, just to make sure that when I've put it in position, it stays in position. When you're firming soil in with your feet and you're trying to get a pole straight, very often it will move around, etc, etc. So by being able to put it in the hole, concrete it, let that concrete go off, and then backfill the hole, everything should be in line, because obviously I've got to get 7 of these in line down the garden, both sides of the polytunnel, so 14 altogether, and it's got to be square, etc. So the idea is to fabricate these foundation anchors, ground anchors, and then the tube from the polytunnel will slide inside that tube. What I will then do is use a U-bolt, and this isn't an idea I've come up with, this is a system that one of the main polytunnel manufacturers uses, and they put a U-bolt clamped around that tube, sitting on top of this tube. And what that allows you to do is you could lift the polytunnel up, the frame up, to tighten the polythene, but it won't go down because the U-bolt is clamping it around and it's resting on the top of this tube. And what I'll do once I've got the polythene all nice and tight is I'll then drill a hole through both the tubes and put another bolt through. So that's the idea of the ground anchors. And this will just be mild steel, and I will paint it as best I can, waterproof it, and they're going to last the time that I'm going to be in this house anyway, so at least 10 years. So that's that. Now obviously with the frame, it has this rail going all the way around the bottom. I'm not going to use any of that. That rail is purely there excuse me, it's purely there to keep the hoops in place, but obviously if I'm going to be using the ground anchor system, that doesn't matter. And the other thing is I'll be able to use some of these poles for other projects in the garden, netting cages and all sorts of things. And as I said, because you got 7 hoops on this and it's a 6-metre tunnel, now they're quite close together, when a lot of the tunnels are about 1.5 metres apart. So my intention would be to make the tunnel fit the space that I've got, spacing the hoops out equally, and then using the steel that's provided, put the rails in, ridge rail and the side rails. Now I accept that if I alter the spacing of the hoops, I'm going to have to re-drill some of the holes in these rails, but that isn't a problem. It's a drill bit and a drill, maybe a few extra bolts here and there. These diagonal braces are really important on polytunnels, and on this tunnel they're really quite low and quite a shallow angle. I will be changing these so that they go from the pole of the ground anchor to the hoop of the polytunnel, and I'll probably use some P-clips to do that onto the point of the polytunnel. I don't want to weld the frame of the polytunnel for 2 reasons. One, it's galvanised, and if I weld it I'll break the galv, and 2, it's a very thin metal, and my welding set really won't go down that low. So I will weld to the ground anchors because there'll be a heavier gauge steel tube, and then put a P-clip there, so that brace will be at a much steeper angle. In addition to that reinforcing, I can put some crop bars across because I'm making the whole thing at least 2 feet higher, so I can put some crop bars across on as many hoops as I feel like, and maybe even some a diagonal brace a bit further down as well. I can add reinforcing and bracing as I see fit, with a combination of welding and P-clips anywhere on the structure. Regarding the polythene, I'll be buying a proper polytunnel cover, and rather than digging the trench and doing the trench method, I will fix a anchor board all the way around using the ground anchor tubes that I've put in. And what that allows you to do is, because the polythene is fixed to the ground anchors, you can then lift. So your polythene's fixed to these via a wooden board running along that's U-bolted to these foundation tubes, and that allows you then to lift the frame of the polytunnel and adjust this bolt to suit, keeping the polythene tight. So if it went slack in a year's time, I could tighten it up again. So I hope you've liked this video. I hope you like the idea as well. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions and suggestions, or if you think I've overlooked something, you think I'm walking into a trap with this, please let me know. And please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.